Hello, everybody. Hello, Lou.
Hey, Ito.
Good to see you. And today we're going to look at something a little bit different. As we do every year, we're going to look at some camera data numbers from the CIPA in Japan, which is the Camera and Imaging Product Association, if I'm not mistaken. And like we did last year and all the previous years before that, we have taken the information and produced some slightly nicer, basically graphs or tables for you, and we're going to talk about them. So before we start, 2 points. First, all these numbers come from CIPA, and CIPA gets their numbers from manufacturers, and specifically from mostly Japanese manufacturers. So Chinese manufacturers, if you're looking at DJI and all the Chinese lens manufacturers are not included. So there are some basically cameras and mostly lenses which are not included in this information, but this is the data that we have. So this is what we're talking about. And what else? Another point that we also mentioned last year, we'll mention this briefly. The data talks about two distinct points. One is cameras and lenses manufactured, and the second is cameras and lenses shipped. Now, there is not a big difference between these two. Like the cameras and lenses that were manufactured by Sony, Canon, Nikon, and all the other manufacturers is what they made per year for 2024. And the second data point is basically what they shipped to stores or distributors throughout the year. Some of them, obviously, probably closer to the end of the year, was not shipped to them. So there is a slightly larger number of cameras and lenses manufactured than actual shipped. We don't have the sales numbers. This is a data point that we don't have in this set of information, but most cameras and lenses that are shipped are also sold. So we can refer to them as sold. It's not going to be a big difference. But again, this is the second point that we wanted to make. So let's dive into the actual numbers. And we're going to start with the number of total cameras, again, sold, manufactured, shipped, whatever you want to call it, in 2024. And we have on the screen, you can see the graph that we made for you. And Lou, the number of cameras, total cameras that was, again, let's say sold in 2024 was
8.3 million.
Yeah, okay. So if we're looking at this versus 2023, it's basically an increase of 6%, which was 7. In 2023, we had 7.8.
It's about 5%.
5?
Yeah, 0.5.
Okay, so somewhere between that and that, and regardless. But if you're looking back, like 2022 was 8 million and 2021 was 8.3.
Mm-hmm.
So we basically came back to 2021
Exactly.
in terms of sales or whatever, manufactured or however you want to call it. And in 2020, that's interesting, which is the first COVID year, we had 8.7. Which is considerably, I would say, considerably more. So that's pretty interesting. And obviously, if you go even further back, like 2019, we had 14.8. So that was a huge drop, and we are nowhere near that. So we might be getting closer to 2020, but I'm not sure that we will ever, I don't want to say ever, but not in the near future, going to get back to before the COVID year.
Mm-hmm.
So that's in terms of total number of cameras. Now let's dive a little bit deeper into the numbers, and let's look at the number of lenses sold. So in 2024, we had
9.6 million.
Yeah, which is actually a nice increase from 2023, which was 9.1. So again, I don't know, 5%, something like that. You don't have to do the math.
500,000 units.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a considerable number. But again, interestingly, in 2022, we had 10 million. Mm-hmm. So we're still below 2022, 2021, which was 9.8. 2020 was not a very good year in terms of lenses sold. Actually, the worst year in the recent history, at least until since 2007. So, which was 8.8. But other than that, I mean, there is again a slight increase, but we're still not we're still definitely not in like 2019 numbers, which was close to 14 million, something like
Right.
that. So that's interesting. Again, we don't have the number for the Chinese lenses. So actually, the number is probably higher than this. Not sure by how much.
But it does track with the number of cameras, the same type of precipitous drop between 2019 and 2020.
Yes, and
I mean, there's a kind of a drop in both situations. Also, between 2018 and 2019, in both situations.
yeah, but I think that there was a bigger drop in between 2022 and 2023.
Mhm.
We have a slight drop in total cameras
Yeah,
sold, but a pretty big drop in lenses. So it's not it. But again, this is probably not the right table to look at, because this is total cameras, which includes also
sure.
compact cameras which have built-in lenses. So
But since it includes interchangeable lens cameras, some part of the drop in lenses is probably due to just there being fewer new cameras being bought. If you have fewer cameras
yeah,
being bought,
no,
that
for sure.
means fewer lenses as well to go with them, to some extent.
To some extent, yeah.
Yeah.
Because some people, I mean, everybody that, most people who buy like an APS-C camera or even an entry-level full frame usually buy it with a lens. But higher-end mirrorless cameras, now it's mostly mirrorless, you don't necessarily buy them with a lens if you
Right.
have lenses,
Right.
and vice versa. If you sometimes just buy a lens, you don't need to buy a camera. So I think it's a little bit more complicated. Okay, so let's look at the third table that we have, and this one is for non-interchangeable cameras. So again, basically what we usually call compact cameras.
Right.
Again, I'm not sure if that's the what is actually missing from this, and we'll talk about what is missing in general from this data. There are a lot of like specific things which are missing. So what is missing is like a division between, first of all, full frame and APS-C,
Right.
or even smaller than APS-C, but let's say full frame and APS-C. There are not a lot of full frame non-interchangeable cameras. So you have Leica, which I'm not sure is even in this data. You have Fuji, which is APS-C. What else do we have? We have the Sony RX1, which is still selling surprisingly at a very high cost,
Right.
but it's still here. But not a lot more actually, and obviously all the smaller, like Canon sells some like small sensor compact cameras, and I'm not sure if like all the Fuji Instax cameras are here. They were quite popular, I think,
Right.
recently. So I don't know. Anyway, let's look at the numbers. So in 2024 we had 1.8. In 2023 we had 1.7.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually a slight increase,
Mm-hmm.
which is surprising because this is, I think, the first year. No, not the first year in quite a few years where we saw an increase. The last increase in sales in non-interchangeable cameras was in 2017. I'm not sure why. We got
Hmm.
from 12.4 to 13.3. And then all the way from there to what we are seeing now was a decrease, like a decline in the number of cameras sold, manufactured, whatever. So it's interesting. Again, it's not a huge increase. What would you attribute this to?
I would love to know the role of action cameras in this, whether they're playing a role.
None. I mean, unless you're referring to the role that they play indirectly, because number of action cameras is DJI, which is not included here,
Right.
and GoPro, which is not included here
Right.
because they're American. And what else? 300 Go. What's their name? 360. Insta.
Insta
Insta. They're
360 is
also Chinese.
Chinese,
So
right?
So
Yeah, so
none of
they're
them.
hmm.
Unless again you're referring indirectly. Indirectly, they might influence the sales, but they will take maybe sales and from these cameras. But I don't know how to quantify this. No, I was thinking more
Yeah.
about the impact of Fuji on
Right.
this.
Right.
Fuji with
Instant cameras.
yeah, no, okay, this is one, and the second side of that is also Fuji, and that's with the X100 series, which has been very, very influential. Now, I don't have the numbers for the actual X100 series sold. I know that they have been extremely popular,
Hmm.
like in terms of people wanting to buy them versus the actual number of cameras that exist on the market.
Huh.
I don't know if this means that Fuji just doesn't keep up with demand. They somehow um, do this by design. They only produce a small
Well,
number.
we were just saying that the difference, there really is not much of a difference between the number of cameras shipped and sold.
That's true.
Camera companies are looking very closely at how many cameras they're going to need
Yeah.
for the next quarter, let's
Yeah.
say.
And they manufacture what they need. No, I was thinking about something a little bit different. Some manufacturers sometimes create I don't know if to call it a false need for a camera, like a false limitation of the number of cameras that are available on the market, and then it's difficult to get the camera, and then more people want it.
I could see that working with the instant cameras
Not sure if
because they're
the instant
trendy.
or okay.
Because they're trendy.
I'm not sure if those are the problematic one. I was talking specifically about the X100 series.
Or that.
More, yeah.
Yeah.
So I know, but that's speculation. We don't have the data, so to support this, this is just us. So let's go back to actual data, and this time we're going to look at some maybe more interesting information. And this is the interchangeable lens cameras that were again sold, manufactured, shipped. And if we're looking at 2024, we had 6.4 million. But if you go back a year, we had 6.1. So this is about 4%, something like that increase. Again, it's not huge, but it's interesting. And I think that if we go to the next graph, we'll see the actual difference, because this table doesn't give us enough information. We don't know why this change has happened. Why do we see this increase? Is it with mirrorless or with DSLRs, or what's going on? So let's move over to the last one, and this is interesting. So this one is talking about DSLRs versus mirrorless cameras. Again, soul chipped, whatever you want to call it. And this one is we have to look at this more closely, I would say. So first of all, what do we see? We see that mirrorless has basically gone up from 4.9 million cameras to 5.5. So that's a pretty big increase. I would say, like, I think 12%, something like that. But on the same token, if you look at the difference between 2023 and 4 for DSLRs, you see
Almost
about
unchanged.
almost unchanged. I would say no. Well, again, it depends on
It's
how you look at it.
100,000 less.
Yeah, it's about 10%.
10%.
10%. Well,
Yeah.
again, it's not a lot of cameras, so the percentage is high. But yeah, so we see a decrease of about 10%, and I mean, it makes sense. What's I think still is interesting in this number, and I'm talking about DSLRs,
Yeah.
is that you even see, I mean, still it's 1 million cameras sold in 2024. And there has been no new DSLRs from Canon, Nikon, definitely not. Who else is making? Pentax is making. I'm not sure. Maybe they released something, but
So they must know something that the rest of us don't, because
yeah, I think. Look, we talked about this just before this. We shot this. The point is
few
the way.
different theories.
Yeah, the way that I'm looking at this is that I'm thinking that it's mostly the entry level APS-Cs, which are DSLRs, which are very, very inexpensive, and people still buy them.
Right.
And we're talking, I think, almost exclusively about Canon, because Nikon, as far as I can tell, is no longer manufacturing DSLRs, I think. Correctly in the in the comments if you know otherwise.
So we're talking about the Canon Rebels, basically, the
Yeah,
T
mostly. And
line.
and you had some interesting thought about like the full frame DSLRs that Canon has still.
Right. I mean, we've got the 5D and the 6D. I keep seeing them being used by wedding photographers now, particularly by the guys who are just focusing on photos.
Yeah.
And maybe those guys, if you've been shooting for 20 years, why have to learn a new camera? If the one you have is finished, so maybe they would just want to buy exactly the same thing over again, so there's no learning curve.
I don't know the answer to. I mean, it's a valid point. I mean, I know. Well, it's interesting to see what other our viewers are thinking about this, because I don't have a horse in this. No, seriously,
I see
I
very
don't know.
few of the Rebels around. The ones that I see are older. I would differ from you in saying I don't think people are buying many of those anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
And you don't think that like in Best Buy and all those places where you
I'd
see
like to
like
see if they have them still. But yeah, that's where people would go every once in a while to get one on a whim, and
the
then
idea is just buying the cheapest camera. Somebody's telling buy the cheapest camera just so you can give your kid or your father or whoever, like
maybe they'll get started in it, and this is a way for them to get started. Sure, that's what buying somebody a Rebel can do. But yeah, I'm wondering if now there's just so much attention on smartphones that most people think maybe I shouldn't buy this, DSLR. They're going to have to buy lenses, and maybe they could take just as good. I think the people who are used to making that decision are now just thinking, smartphone will do it.
yeah. No, that's definitely a big part
Yeah,
of the reason why we're seeing the decline
of
in
cameras overall.
yeah, of
Right.
course. But this still doesn't really explain the 1 million DSLRs that are still sold in 2024. Again, I think that the last DSLR from Canon, Nikon, I can't remember, but Canon was 2000 and maybe 19.
Mhm.
So we're talking about like what, 5-year-old
Right.
cameras at best, probably more. It's kind of strange.
Yeah.
And there are options even from Canon itself. There are like fairly inexpensive like mirrorless options.
So the other part of my theory was all about the Canon glass. So a lot of people still have those Canon lenses sitting around that are fantastic lenses, some of them more expensive lenses compared to other companies. And either you have them sitting around from your last camera, or maybe you've just acquired a whole set of lenses from someone who's moved on. And why buy a super expensive camera when, to be the camera for these lenses?
Yeah, that's an option.
I have old
lenses.
old lenses, and I would rather buy one of these cheaper DSLRs than a mirrorless, just so that I can use those lenses. I mean, how many people are we talking about that have a situation like this? I don't know, but my grandfather had a lot of lenses laying around when I checked.
There is always the option to use an adapter, but as you said, the cameras themselves, if you're buying mirrorless, an equivalent mirrorless to say a 5D4 will be pretty expensive, or I know
Exactly.
6D Mark II,
Right.
whatever. I know
Right.
it will be more expensive probably. So
it may be a cheap option, for a really cheap option for some people over the long term.
maybe it's
Total
it's
costs.
it's a valid point. I don't know, but again, we're speculating here, so it's always fun. So I want to conclude by mentioning a few things. So first of all, one point that we didn't mention in this talk, but we'll have in the full article on LensVid, is the division by region. And this is another key point that CIPA is providing. So we'll have like, I think the Americas, both South and North America are in one go. And you have Japan as one thing, China, I think, separately, and the rest of Asia as one, Europe as one, and I think the rest is the rest of the world, something like.
Africa and Australia and Oceania,
I
maybe?
think, yeah, something like that. Anyway, we'll have this information about the changes in 2024 compared to the year before that in the article on LensVid, and of course all the data that we provided here. But what I wanted to speak about in the conclusion is what we don't have, and as we said, we don't have the actual sales numbers, but I don't think that they're very different than the numbers that we just gave. But more precise information that we're lacking, and maybe we can talk to SIPA if there is somebody that can help us get the information, or maybe add it in future data sets that they do every year. Is first of all the difference between full frame and APS-C,
Right.
and this is really interesting, both for cameras and lenses. We don't have this information. We don't know if there are a lot more DSLR, like DSLRs, full frame mirrorless cameras versus
Right. This would answer part of our question from before, is if it's a whole bunch of rebels that are being bought,
exactly.
this would help us find out.
And also this is also true for lenses, which is like really interesting to see how many more full
Yeah.
frame or maybe APS-C lenses are sold compared to full frame. So
Right.
we don't have this information. Another point which I think is a little bit more complicated for them to provide is, I would say, video or maybe cine versus like more traditional either stills or at least hybrid cameras, or maybe even lenses, but I don't know. It's because the division is not very is not. I mean, uh, do they include like a C70, Canon C70, FX6, or something like that? Do they include FX9, Venice? I don't know. Do they include the C400?
That's what SIPA's job is to come up with the definitions and the standards.
Yeah, but I'm not sure that this is. I mean, you're right, but I'm
Yeah.
not sure that this is like. This is more like a marketing term.
Right.
Than
How
an
are you
actual.
already classifying your own
Yeah.
camera?
So I don't know, but
Hmm.
it would be interesting if there was some sort of information about this, if they can divide it somehow. I don't know. So this is in terms of the data sets. Now, I usually end these talks by speculating about what we might see in 2025. Honestly, this was kind of, I wouldn't say a big surprise, but we did see an increase, I think, almost overall, in maybe except for DSLRs, which is obviously not very surprising. I would say that what we might see in 2025, based on the trends in here, are a continued very, very small increase in the number of both cameras and lenses sold, maybe even with the compact cameras. If, and this is important, if we will see a new Sony RX1 or whatever they want to call it, like a full
Right.
frame compact camera, so to speak. So that might increase the general sales of compact cameras by a little bit.
And if a Chinese company comes out with a new camera, we could
That-
see a drop in interchangeable lens camera sales, according to SIPA,
Yeah, because
and have no other way to explain it except
Yeah.
for that.
that will be very interesting. And we already discussed on a few episodes on LensVid Talk, we discussed the possibility that DJI will come up with their
Right.
own system.
Yeah.
They
A
do
lot
have
of
a camera,
speculation.
but like we're talking the Ronin 4D or
Yeah,
whatever. It's a super, super high end, like
Right.
$10,000 or
yeah,
sort
something
of.
like that.
Yeah, a camera, it's not going to impact these numbers very much. But if they come up with like a full frame camera and a system with lenses, they already have some lenses, like a full system,
Right.
that can impact sales.
Yeah.
They can even like reduce the number of like Canon, Nikon,
And it works with
Sony.
all their other filming accessories smoothly, then
No,
a
no,
lot
that-
of people would be
I
willing to
definitely
jump.
s- yeah.
Yes.
I definitely see this happening. So if we will see that, I think that you're right. We might see a decrease in the number of cameras sold next year because some people are going to buy that instead of Canon, Nikon, Sony, whatever.
hmm
So that's definitely going to happen. Other than that, I don't like foresee a lot of big changes in 2025. But who knows? I mean, we have been having so many strange things happening. You know, we have the war in Ukraine. We had COVID. We have the shortage of chips. We have problems with like global
Shipping.
shipping.
Yeah.
So we had all sorts of stuff happening, and it's very difficult to predict. But that's everything that we have for you. Make sure to check out the full article on LensVid with the rest of the information that I mentioned. Don't forget to subscribe to LensVid in general, LensVid Talk, all the reviews. We have quite a few of them coming very soon. Thank you, Lou.
All right, Ito.
And we'll see you in the next video.
See you next time.
Bye.